EAWAG. Hi everyone and welcome to the Chrysler Pavilion. I'm Joseph and this panel discussion will be about climate change and urban resilience and the climate adaptation in a broader context of a global climate impact. So thank you very much for being here.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to have all of you here. We have a fantastic panel discussion today that brings science, practice, and obviously policy together when it comes to the linkages between urbanization and climate change. We have the pleasure of, first of all, starting with Geneva, who's the head of the Institute for Environmental Sciences at the University of Geneva, and also member of the Swiss delegation here at COP29. Then our friend from the head of UNEP cities, Gulnara Roll, will be joining us. Max is online from Heidelberg, and he will be bringing us a different perspective on this connection between cities and urbanization and climate change. And we'll follow it up with a discussion with Thomas Anderson, former chancellor of State University, head of division at OECD, and member of EU Task Force on NDS. Abhishek, we will have you also as part of the discussion. You're teaching and conducting research at ETH. Tural Aliyev is also your colleague from EAWAG, who will be bringing another perspective from his work, his research on urbanization and climate change. Marshall, you are with us also from Zurich, bringing us a different perspective on nature-based solutions, but also on different entry points into the urbanization and climate change. And obviously, the final one is Jan. You'll be bringing us some elements of your research on migration and cities. Without further ado, and because we have some audience and our speaker online, I want to give the floor to you, Geraldine, to share with us some of your insights from on urbanization and resilience building when it comes to climate strategy. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you for the people who are online for following us, and thanks to all the participants to this panel co-organized by the University of Geneva, the ICCI, and also the EAWAG, and with several members of academia and practice community. So that's great to be here. As a keynote, I will make a more introductory statements on cities, climate processes, and urban resilience. And first, I will recall that some key context and facts that 66% of the current world population is living in cities, and it will grow, and it will be clearly the more again in 2050. Then more than 70% of emissions are in cities, coming from mainly from three kind of sectors: building and construction, transportation, industry, and moreover indirect emission from food and consumption. We have to take into account the fact that there are very, very different contexts and city types with global north and south, different development contexts, informal and existing urbanization needs, and also the fact that there are different kind of risks and climate exposure, and also all the contexts related to inequalities, human rights, and all the transversal issues on poverty eradication and sustainable development. This panel is also inscribed in the context of the next IPCC report, a special report on cities, which generates lots of expectation both for the science, urban scientists, climate science communities, but also to enable action in relation with international organizations and also local government networks and organizations. Cities first are the places of major and strong impacts. They are concerned by very diverse but intense pace of temperature increase, extreme heat waves, and heat islands. They are also the places of increasing droughts and aridity. We can see the emergence of most remote cities concerned by day zeros and extreme water shortages, and yes, suffering from droughts and for their water access. They are also in relation with heat concerned by wildfire that, like we could have seen this summer in California, those wildfire are coming closer and closer to urbanized area. In relation with the cryosphere, cities are also regions that are very much impacted by sea level rise and obviously coastal flooding and also river flooding, especially for cities in watershed that are fed by glacier melt, with a lot of events, dramatic events as river flooding, but also landslides. And then there are, and we observed this last month, major metropolitan areas were exposed to severe storms, monsoons, and hurricanes. And to finish, all those risks are sometimes compound and related one each other with impacts on infrastructure. Some, as you can see on this picture in California, where hurricanes are also destroying new potential to power renewables and renewable generation. Like here, it was the destroying of a new solar farm, new solar plants in California after recent storms. So, but that's not the only face of the story. We have also to notice that cities are the major places to find solutions and to mitigate climate change. And here is a quick extract from the very recent UN Habitat World City Report on climate change in city, which was released this year, and which sends all the potential, the option to mitigate climate change through different policy options with nature-based solution, obviously, but also also with co-benefits to deal with informal settlements and to better all the livelihoods and to deal with informal settlements that is existing and will exist in the future. And you can see with this very, I think, great picture all the levels of action, all the potential of action from city authorities, urban areas that are here put on in gigatons and that could impact very positively the urban, the remaining carbon budget in the future, action on transportation and planning, on housing and energy efficiency installation for housing, whether it is in existing cities, in emerging ones, and for informal settlements, all the solution regarding district heating, new, very innovative cooling infrastructure that we will depend on due to the increase of temperature and the need of ecological cooling system, all the action related to lifestyles, the way we can help and support city dwellers to be able to adopt new lifestyles as well, in terms of transportation, in terms of consumption, food, waste management as well. You have this very broad overview, which is very interesting on all the potential of action. But at the same time, cities would have also to adapt to the very wide variety of risks that are currently emerging, which I mentioned before. And here there are also solutions that are on the table, not always easy to put in place, and I will come on this in a few minutes. But there is a huge potential of nature-based solution by increasing green spaces, green infrastructure, and building with biosources material. There is all the issue of equitable access to cooling infrastructure, which are also adaptation policies. There is also all the challenges related to rain and river flooding management, in particular in glacier-fed watersheds, where there are all kind of solutions for of city retreat, but also no building zones, but also how to adapt in context of more precarious habitat and livelihoods. There is the challenges of food insecurity, sustainable urban water management. All this, in fact, local authorities have to manage jointly their mitigation and adaptation challenges in the future. So to conclude on this very broad overview, I would raise four main points. The first one is that it will be, I think, the pitch of the next coming IPCC reports on cities. Is the fact that cities are both the major hotspots of the ongoing climate change and the future climate impacts, but they are also fostering huge potential for action and to scale up action intensively and rapidly. Second is the fact that the risk related to extreme temperature and precipitation are compounded and also increased by the exposure to those impacts, even with for the new facilities, the green ones that we could develop. So we have to think jointly adaptation and mitigation. Third, there are very key action levels that are in the hand of metropolitan and local governments and also local and non-governmental stakeholders on all the mitigation options that I mentioned. And the good news is there are clear pathways for climate resilient development, combining mitigation and adaptation. But all of this, and I will conclude on these 2 points, we are facing everywhere, and in particular in developing countries, of major breaks and barriers. And they are very important with regard to investment capacity, access to funding, and the way to also build acceptable options. There are also breaks regarding data and knowledge and participation. But the very good news is that at all those breaks and barriers, once you are able to assess it, we would be able to tackle it through new and more more actions, in particular on several range of actions like international cooperation, and it's the role of UN organization in particular, but also international organization, networks of local governments to support capacity building, to develop also the diffusion of experimentation, which are sometimes at a very small scale, at the neighbor or the block scale, but that could be expanded through sharing best practices or innovative practices at a very local and sometimes collective or individual level worldwide. So here, I think, and I would like to close on it, we are clearly aware of those potential of action, both on mitigation and adaptation, but we have now more to work on the breaks, the barrier, and how to remove them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Geraldine. You brought out to us the importance of these hotspots that are cities. And I would add maybe at the greater watershed of cities, it's the tipping point. Cities are also about what they are playing in terms of their role, in terms of putting a map that they're putting on the map of tipping points, but also, as you said, the barriers and enablers also. And one of the enablers you mentioned, our international organization for capacity building and collective knowledge build-up. And without further ado, I just want to move to our next speaker, Gulnara. Gulnara Roll, you're here from Paris, from the UNEP Cities Unit, heading UNEP Cities Unit, and you'll present to us the Global ABC Coalition for Alliance on Passive Cooling, Decarbonization, Constructions, and Building in the Cities, that really illustrate what Geraldine shared with us in terms of enabling that positive spin towards solutions.
Thank you so much, Alexander. And I'm very excited to speak here because we worked very closely when I was working in Geneva at the UN Economic Commission for Europe. I moved 1 year ago. At UNEP, I think we have even more possibilities to cooperate. So I think I also brought some examples of our projects simply to show where's the entrance point for reestablishing the cooperation. And I think the cooperation opportunity is much larger actually what concerns UNEP. So UNEP is a global environmental authority, but it's also working on cities. And our approach really is kind of very integrated approach. So we have the topics of climate, biodiversity, and pollution prevention and reduction as the three pillars. And we're working very closely with the science, actually. We have a chief scientist at UNEP. And what concerns, for instance, the cooperation with UNFCCC and with the climate corps. We are producing, for instance, annually UNEP emissions gap report and adaptation gap report. Actually, the main authors of those are here, so I'm happy to connect. And this really gives us framework. So basically, they say how far countries are getting in terms of reducing the emissions on every year, and what is the gap in the adaptation. And this year adaptation gap report, which was actually launched a week ago, speak about finances. What is the gap in terms of the finance for adaptation work? So therefore, we're really working very closely on interface of science and policy. So we are doing this flagship report, and me as the head of the cities unit. I'm also, so we are working on all different issues related to this triple planetary crisis. So this is just some of the numbers, just wanted to show, but I think Geraldine already kind of outlined all these topics. So we are looking also in climate change division, actually from both mitigation point of view and also adaptation point of view. So we're working actually on the streams of buildings, transport, food, so we're cooling, and urban energy. So and for each of the topics, we actually have coalition. So because we as UN agencies are very small, right? We still have very few staff, so we cannot reach everybody. So what we do is we actually serve as a secretary to formalize coalitions. So we have formalized coalitions of stakeholders. Just to bring you an example, we have a Global Alliance on Buildings and Construction, which has 340 organizations as members. I mean, there is many more members want to join, but it's also capacity of secretariat, which don't always allow. And what we do is we work in thematic group. For instance, under Global Alliance Building Construction, we are working on topics of data. So, for instance, we're developing kind of digital twin building passports. We're working on finance. We're working with all the IFIs, international financial institutions. We work on sufficiency. There is a working group on sufficiency, and you are welcome to join. It's like open working groups led by members, like how to build more with less. And for instance, today we had the University of Lausanne presenting in our pavilion. We have a buildings and cooling pavilion about the new approach to cement. So that's kind of one of the examples of the work on materials. So we work also a lot on materials, looking into biomaterials, but also in traditional materials. So about, transforming cement, making it less carbon, carbon containing. So, so Global ABC is one of the kind of platforms. Then we have a full coalition. It is a coalition working on cooling, both on passive cooling, but also kind of active cooling, looking into the cold chain, like transporting vaccines and food, but also equipment. So how to make sure that we are using the cooling equipment, which has less of HFC gases, which are harmful to ozone layer, and we're looking also with ozone secretariat. And also we have like food waste uh, uh, coalition as well, bringing also kind of local governments and experts together with FAO, looking into the reduction of the food waste, especially at the cities level. Yeah, so we are very open to cooperation from this point of view, and really happy to cooperate. And then, so these coalitions really serve, so we do flagship reports like science, we engage scientists, and then coalitions really serve as a kind of a mesh through which we go science and develop methodologies for implementation. And then we do technical cooperation projects with many partners. We work with, because we have regional local offices, but we usually have like with UN Habitat, UNOPS, or C40, Global Covenant of Mayors, World Resource Institute. So we have very many different partners. So technical cooperation and then finance. And we have finance units who are actually working with the national banks. So for instance, they agree with national banks, they give a good credit to buy refrigeration equipment which is more ecologically friendly. So it's very practical. The work is going from science to implementation in a very kind of practical and pragmatic level. So I'm sure that this is University of Geneva and Swiss approach in general. So I think we have a lot of opportunities to cooperate. So I know we don't have much time, so I just would like to demonstrate how in practical way we are actually implementing this approach, going from science, normative-based policies, and implementation and finance. So I just would like to say about new projects that we're doing, which are looking more into adaptation, simply because on mitigation, I think we're all quite well aware, and I think I agree with Geraldine as well, that on adaptation we need to speak more, because it is such a good resource on adaptation. And we can do much more on this, because on mitigation, we don't have enough funding. So whatever we don't do in mitigation, we have to pick up on adaptation, right? So otherwise on loss and damage, again, where we don't have much money. So just to say about these three projects, and also this is one of the school coalition I mentioned already. This is the way to work. So generation restoration is about adaptation. It is a German government-funded project in 23 cities where we are working with the Global South. And our approach is also really trying to push more projects into the Global South countries because we see that finance, which is used for mitigation adaptation, is not yet coming to the Global South. So we work now in 23 cities where we basically promote ecosystem restoration approach. Let's say I was in Manaus, Brazil, just in July. So this is where we are, giving money. We just giving money to the city, and they're planting trees, usually like cacao trees, fruit trees, in area with informal settlements with indigenous population. So it really helps to restore ecosystems, give livelihood to population, but also legalize informal settlements. Or like I went to Istanbul, it's another of our pilot project under generation restoration, where we're supporting like urban forest, and what they do is they're making permeable pavements, for instance, they're stripping like pavement and making it more permeable. They help migratory birds, so basically also restore ecosystem. And I know that in Geneva you are doing something similar on improving the biodiversity. And Urban Shift is an important platform where, UNEP is also a partner with the World Bank on Global Raw Metal Facility. So we actually also provide funding. So Urban Shift is one of the platforms of the cities where I support different cities in, through urban planning, food, like building capacities, developing local regulations. So I'm happy to explain. So you see, it's very wide partnership. The main partner is the World Bank for this, and I think this is what we want to continue, like speaking about research institution. Probably this is our wish to continue working with. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much, Gulnara. You very rightly so showed a very practical way of enabling and in optimizing the science policy in practice interface and how you can make a difference. And international organizations like yours are very active. UNEP has been very active in enabling some of these cities and member cities in terms of using some of the pledges and some of the initiatives that you mentioned. I want to use this opportunity also to or actually we are lack of time. So I would like to move to the next speaker who's online, who's joining us, is our colleague from Heidelberg. Max, do you hear us?
Yes, I
Max
can hear you.
Jungman, wonderful. Max Jungman is executive manager of the Heidelberg Center for the Environment at Heidelberg University. And Max, you'll be discussing with us the THC high resolution monitoring and local climate action. The floor is yours, Max.
Thank you so much, and I will share my screen with you and begin my short insights into our work at Heidelberg University. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for this great opportunity and for the great talks before, which I can directly connect with, to give you a glimpse of our work on high-resolution greenhouse gas emissions monitoring and local climate action. And I hope you can see my slides now, and I will take you.
Yes, we can see. Go ahead.
Excellent, excellent. I will take you to a quick journey in changing perspectives, starting with one that we're quite familiar with. The picture Blue Marble here from 1972 already led to a changed perspective on our planet, because this was one of the first pictures taken from space, and it showed on the one hand how beautiful our planet is, on the other how fragile it is. And since then we've discovered the effects of climate change and the consequences it has on our day-to-day lives. And we can also, as the previous speakers said, feel these effects more and more. My PhD was on climate change and health, and last year we saw one of many examples of climate change already affects our health in the city of New York. This is a picture taken from Brooklyn looking at Manhattan, and what we could see here was that people had to take out their COVID masks just to go on the streets of New York, to go into a park, because air pollution was so bad that it was unsafe to go outside without a mask. And the air pollution, however, was not so bad because of the local sources for air pollution, but actually because of the wildfires, the forest fires in northern Canada, and the winds had brought this into New York City. So we see that the sustainability challenges that we're facing are very complex, but climate change is already affecting cities in multiple ways now. We often think about heat waves, we think about floods, storms, but there are also very nuanced health effects that we're already seeing. But when we compare this global perspective that I showed the slide before and this local impact that we're seeing, there's often a disconnect between our action, our day-to-day lives, and these global long-term challenges. And when we look at politics, we're at the top and bringing together countries from all over the world, and we have this international perspective, these international negotiations that are really, really important. But as we know, we're not moving fast enough and not effectively enough. And at the same time, we're seeing the emergence of more actors when it comes to climate governance, which is why we often talk about polycentric climate governance. And the previous speaker talked about initiatives by C40, Global Covenant of Mayors. Cities like Paris, Geneva, Heidelberg are getting more and more active in contributing their own share in climate action. So we see a network of different actors, not just on the international level, but also on the national level, on the regional, the subnational level. And we see that cities are changing already. As Geraldine said earlier, there are nature-based solutions. There are lots of options that cities have to take action. For example, here we see the German city of Düsseldorf, how it looked like near the river Rhine in 1990 in the picture above, and then in 2019 in the picture below. So we see there is change. We see there are lots of options of what cities can do, but very often the evidence base is lacking. So very often cities are doing something here and there, and they see what other cities are doing, and they're hoping that this will have the effects that it needs to have to turn this around. But there's a lot of information missing on which actions are actually helpful, what should we invest in, which resources would be used effectively. So science can play an important role in this part. And what we're trying to do in Heidelberg, but also with our colleagues in Geneva and in other countries, is to basically make the invisible visible, because the root causes for climate change and where it's connected to our local action are often invisible, the greenhouse gas emissions. And we now have new technological opportunities such as CO2 cameras, as in the picture here, where we can point them at point sources to show the actual emissions coming out there. Or what we can see here is the CO2 concentration in Heidelberg. It will show this in a second, where it pops up at certain times of the day, and we can show the emissions just from traffic along the streets here to show which kind of effects it could have to introduce certain measures to reduce traffic by car and combustion engines in this field. So we're working with city governance, and in this case Heidelberg and Mannheim, and we're also working closely with Geraldine from Geneva and her colleagues. And in Heidelberg, we will introduce one of the first CO2 sensor networks in Germany very soon. We actually just ordered 25 sensors from the Beacon network from our colleagues at Berkeley in the US, and we will be able to zoom into the city of Heidelberg and show the actual emissions soon. And we're investigating this also from a political science perspective, from an economical perspective, from a legal perspective. If this becomes available, what does it do? What does it do with citizens? What does it do with city governments? Which kind of effects does it have between different NGOs, societal actors, with companies, and so on? So we see there is different information available. We can make the invisible visible. We can zoom into parts of cities and create a different connection to our emissions. And we're investigating what the effects will be and how this also needs to be visualized and further developed. So we're basically asking, what drives local climate action? What are the levers that can make climate action more effective? And how do they incentivize or actually not foster climate action? And what are the impacts of certain climate action measures? What is really effective, what isn't? And how do the different actors in a city community influence each other? Thank you so much for having me today, and feel free to reach out if you have further questions. And from Monday on, I'll also be in Baku at the COP, so if you would like to meet up, I'm more than happy to meet you there. Thank you so much for having me, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much, Max. You're uploaded here, and I'm sure you hear that for right reasons. You exposed to us. We discussed the importance of scientific production when it comes to climate resilience in cities. We discussed the policy with international governance, but the tools that you're bringing to us is really the enabler. It connects us to all the points and all the dots. And the high resolution monitoring mechanisms that you described is a very important element here. We look forward to seeing you here at COP. But meanwhile, I wanted to give the floor to you, Thomas. to start the discussion on how we heard from Geraldine the importance of the scientific production. IPCC is one of the good examples of society's policy interface. We heard from Gulnara some of the mechanisms that the UNEP has developed, and with Max the importance of some of the tools. You've been heading a division at OECD. Now you are in the EU NDS task force. How do you foresee this connection between science, policy, and practice being pushed forward, turbocharged, so that we can accelerate these adaptation needs and also to some degree mitigation, but also adaptation needs? Go ahead.
So very pleased to be here. Thank you for the invitation. I hope you can hear me. It's a little bit noisy. So yes, thank you for the presentations. It is very positive to see all that action, and there is so much dynamism and solutions are around. At the same time, we are very well aware that we are in for a very major challenge, worldwide, and there is concern. Scientists, policymakers, business, everyone is talking about it, and some things are happening and all of that, but still it's not enough. Resources are missing, and we see the problems keep growing. So why are we in that situation? So a fundamental fact here is that nature generates so many benefits. They flow in all kinds of directions and are not just for today or for next week or next month or for a year. They are forever and ever and ever. And they benefit basically at the end of the day everyone. But when you have the option of exploiting nature, which is also there, you can exploit it in the short term and get immediate benefits, and those benefits they come to those who maybe undertaking that action. So there is such a discrepancy between the long-term benefits for everyone and the short-term benefit of those who take nature down. This is an imbalance, which is here, it's very dangerous, and it's going to kill us all unless we can do something really systematic about it. Now, how can you do it? It is about actors, and it is about resources and organization and all of that. Some of the organization can and must be local, because their people are near it, and actors are near it, and it's it's very tangible in a sense. Some of it is tangible. Some of the action must be global, because some benefits are also global. So in a way, it's about connecting global and local. What we hear here, in a sense, is about a kind of momentum and pushing and pulling action that you link the global and the local. In a sense, you're bypassing almost the nation state, where there's a regulation and there's a lot of other things that are not responded. Now, I wanted to mention that, and you also referred to it, in the European Union, there are quite a number of mega urban development projects focusing on nature-based solutions. These are about 80 projects at this time. Each of them have about 10 cities. And these 10 cities are basically awarded resources by the Commission, very competitive process to get these resources. You have to have a lot of ideas what you want to do and have a lot of paperwork to put it, clearly down. Then you have like 5-6 years in each of those projects, and you experiment with a lot of action. And then there are task forces that are trying to pull together the experience of what you learn in these projects. It's an experimental and learning exercise, because part of the problem here now also is that the solutions cannot be standardized. There are lessons to be learned that everybody can benefit from, but you need to be able to implement them locally. So some of these lessons, they have to do with citizen engagement. How can you bring citizens to actually be engaged and require good solutions and then follow up also? It's not just about having a green space or something like that. It's about how you use it. So some of the lessons there are about engaging people from early on, and not just engaging those who are business as usual, the usual suspects. You have to reach broader. And then it's about also that the city, and this is a very important thing that's often forgotten, cities are polarized. There is a lot of fragmentation and lack of harmony in cities. So you have to try to think about the bigger picture, engaging citizens. So one concept that we have championed in this EU context is about healthy corridors. So it's about how you're linking different nature-based solutions and how you try to get people to connect across the boundaries. So it's about inclusion and also being serious about the deprived areas, the groups that are falling behind, because that's causing us a lot of trouble now. Then I think you very rightly pointed to finance, the finance issues, of course. So some of the benefits can be commercialized, and you need innovation, you need private sector and so on, and it needs to be sustainable. Europe, it's clear, is not good enough at it. You mentioned very rightly barriers. There are too many barriers, in the way. So you need to free up, more of that enterprise. But some of these benefits cannot be commercialized in the traditional sense. You have to have the ability for social engagement, social innovation, and there is not a commercializing solution for all. So you need blended finance, much better conditions for blended finance, public-private ownership, and procurement that fixes these things are part of the picture. I wanted to end on one observation. There is a lot of money in this world, which people have in the banks, and they are in the system and so on. There are rich people, there are ordinary people and so on, where they are actually looking for ways of having an impact. But the financial system doesn't have the incentives really to get the money out. And also they have practical difficulties. Due diligence is very hard when you are in the banking sector. You're going to know which of these local projects are going to have funding. So there is a clogging effect in the financial intermediary system that is enormous. Governments cannot channel the resources we need to projects on the ground. And the private, banking, financial, even the insurance sector is totally failing today. So there's a clogging that brings too little resources to this. And this has to be resolved. We need actors coming together and work more creatively, effectively, with cities also and other players to overcome this barrier. That's a lesson we have, and it's a challenge ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas, for these words of wisdom and good sense. Obviously, to be able to turbocharge the climate strategy and nature-based and nature-positive solution, we need really also to think about the financial target. I just want to, we are a little bit short of time. We want to give the floor to you, Tural. Tural Aliyev is at EAWAG, the Swiss Federal Institute of Aquatic Science and Technology, and also he is affiliated to the University of Geneva. Sustainable urban development with particular emphasis on the coastal areas. It happens that you are from Baku, where we are now, and the Caspian Sea can teach us a lot about those issues.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hijazi. Yes, indeed, I would like to give short insights within the intersection of urbanization and climate change within the context of Baku and the Caspian Sea. Okay. Yeah. What we should take into account while we are doing planning on the coastal line of the Caspian Sea and focusing primarily on the city of Baku is that there is an issue we cannot ignore within the context of Caspian Sea. It's a fluctuation of the sea. So within the climate change, on the coastal lines of the seaside, we are talking about sea level rise. On the lake shores, we are talking about shrinking of water level. So Caspian Sea is very particular because we are talking on fluctuation, and as you see the 100 years of fluctuation and accelerated process of water level change. You will see that just recently in the 40s, sea level was dropping off up to 2.5 meters, and then suddenly, and that was surprising to the scientific community, that after 2 decades, it started suddenly to rising up. And it caused flooding to all the coastal areas of the Caspian Sea, including the city of Baku and the coastal areas on the south part, Iranian side, and Turkmen side. So this is one thing that we need to be we need to take into account, that if this scenario will happen within the next decades, and the accelerating process will come back within the sea level rise, we need to be prepared with and prepare for the coastal line of the cities. So here, for instance, if we take this scenario, even though the level of the sea is dropping off now, and within the accelerated process, we need to be prepared after 2-3 decades to the scenario if 2.5 meters sea level rise, if that will happen. So we see that all the critical infrastructure of the city is not prepared for such a scenario, because we're also talking on the coastal line of Baku, the convergence between urbanization and environmental change, and compounded risk, also what Professor Flieger just mentioned. That's a great exposure to new sets of hazards and risks on the Caspian Sea, which creates and causes new set of vulnerabilities. So here we see that within this context of understanding what happens in the intersection of climate change and urbanization, we see the old school planning on the left side and the transformation of the space from last decade, 2 decades, into the public park, and we need to go beyond unidirectional urban planning of the coastal areas, where just you mainly focus on the beautification of the space, and we need to move to the new set of planning, which is integrated to this management plan of the coastal areas, where different scenarios of flooding and also should be taken into account. And here on the left, you see the New York East Coast example, how the planning and multi-level planning can respond to different level of floodings on the coastal zones. So basically, the concept of resilience of today should be not focused only modification of the space, but it should go more deeper and to have more interdisciplinary and comprehensive approach, starting to review science, assessing vulnerabilities and risks, and while developing the adaptation plan, then the implementation and monitoring is important. So while developing adaptation plan, it should also focus on key aspects such as social behavior and human impact on the area, governance structure and policies, linkage analysis for integration solutions, basically identifying the aspects between social, economic, environmental, and urban aspects, and to have adaptive management for sustainability. So that was the key message from my side, saying that the Baku could be, and Baku is a laboratory, a fantastic laboratory to understand this intersection between urban planning, urbanization process, and climate change, and adaptation strategies here to bring something for other cities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tural. Indeed, Caspian Sea and Baku are the knitting labs, concentration of some of the impact that we see on many decades elsewhere as a result of climate change. Here, as a result of specificities of Caspian Sea, it's accelerated. So we see this fluctuation of the sea level, and it's really impacting the infrastructure, urban infrastructure, and the well-being of the population. And things need to be done here in Baku and learned from the practice here in Baku, so that we can be informed for the impact of climate change elsewhere. I give the floor to you now, Abhishek. Dr. Abhishek Narayan is at the EAWAG, Swiss Federal Institute of Aquatic Science and Technology, and you'll be presenting to us your insight on sustainable sanitation solutions, aiming to address urban sanitation challenges and critical to resilient urban infrastructure.
Okay, thank you so much. Can you hear me at the back? Is that loud enough, or a bit more? Yeah. Sorry, it's great to be in the first pavilion when you enter, but it's also a bit noisy. So, we are at the Cryosphere Pavilion, right? And we we often, when we talk about polar regions or regions up in the mountains, we don't necessarily associate it with the term WASH, which stands for water, water supply, sanitation, and hygiene. Now, throughout the rest of the presentations in cities, we heard about how water is a major issue, and that's how climate really manifests itself. But water for humans, if we have to contextualize it, it often comes down to water supply, sanitation, and solid waste. So can we? Oh, so I'm going to bring two polar opposites, as you might think. You know, I'm going to take an example from Greenland and another example from Ghana. So when you look at these two pictures, when we think of Greenland, we often think pristine water. The water supply has absolutely no problems. We can directly drink from the glaciers coming from the source. And perhaps when we think about cities in Ghana, we often imagine fairly crowded cities. There's no proper water supply system or sanitation facilities, right? But what the data actually tells us is these situations are fairly comparable. So this graph kind of shows you how the situation is in Ghana and Greenland. The darker the colors are, whether it's blue or green, it means the better the facilities are. And here you can really see that both in Greenland and in Ghana, the situation is not necessarily at its best, right? And let's dive a little bit deeper into what those commonalities are. In both contexts, over 40% of the population has poor access to water supply, sanitation, and hygiene services. Both rely heavily on non-sewered sanitation technologies or off-grid water supply systems. And the climate change impacts are fairly visible in both these contexts. And I think this is quite a unique situation where we really have to forget the line of what is the global south and what is the global north, because the context and the challenges that both these contexts face start to kind of merge, and the lines get blurry, right? So there's a lot to learn from each other. And I just want to present one short concept on what is climate resilient WASH, whether it's in the context of Greenland or whether it's in the context of Ghana. The principles somehow come down to the basics, right? The first thing is climate resilient WASH must be designed to be inclusive of everyone's public and environmental health. It should not be merely made, you raise toilet latrines because things might get flooded, but then those steps might become excluding to old people, to marginalized communities, disabled, etc. So that's the kind of inclusion that you want to think about. And inclusion also means different types of technologies that you want to start to combine. The second thing that we need to think about is we have to mainstream climate resilience in water and sanitation policies, in urban planning policies, which is far from what is happening today. And the third thing is climate change, for all the great threats that it poses, it also presents an opportunity for co-benefits to synergize different urban development spheres by using climate change as the main lever. And then the third thing is, we're all kind of academics from Switzerland, and we're all working in what I still think are ivory towers, and we often come up with concepts, but not enough practical examples which have proven itself in different contexts. So I think that should be a real focus. And finally, when we think about planning climate resilience for water supply and sanitation, we can't think of only the taps or the toilets, but rather we need to think of the entire value chain, right from where the source is to the pipes, what kind of treatment technologies are we using, how are we reusing things, and all of this together in the context of the water cycle itself, especially the urban water cycle. And that would lead well to what has already been presented on nature-based solutions, on multiple other urban development spheres that we can tap into, including energy. So I'll leave it at that, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Abhishek. You've been also helping. I mean, we would love to hear more about this. Unfortunately, we are short on time, and thank you for your understanding. Mashal, I want to give the floor to you for another kind of a shortened discussion with us and sharing your insight. Mashal Yasnani, you're from EMPA, the Swiss Federal Laboratory of Material Science and Technology, and you'll share with us your insight on innovative energy systems and also energy systems in the urban infrastructure, emphasizing sustainability energy practices and their integration into urban planning.
Wonderful. So thanks a lot for being here and also for having me here. It's my honor and my pleasure. I want to quickly talk to you. Can you hear me well enough back there? Yeah. Okay. So I want to quickly talk to you about the future of urban energy landscapes. And I want to echo a lot of the things that my colleague Abhishek said also about research, happening in silos and the need for practical examples and these points. So without further ado, I'm a group leader, just to let you know, at the Urban Energy Systems Laboratory, and I do research that also crosses between energy sector and other sectors. So should this be working? Thank you. Good. So the urban energy or the city landscape. I just want to not spend too much time on this because I think you got a brief intro to it already. But I want to talk about how massive the problem is of cities and the opportunities, therefore, that they represent. So cities, as you heard earlier, take more than 55% of the world's population live in cities, and that's projected to grow. We also have 75% of the world's primary energy being consumed by urban areas. And up to 60%, now it's even more than that, of total greenhouse gas emissions are attributed to urban areas. So the potential is enormous. It is vital for us to transition to a net zero urban environment. So the urban future plays a vital role in the dialogue to a transition for humanity to sustainability. And if we miss the opportunity or if we fail to include cities adequately in this process, we will not achieve the ambitious climate mitigation goals that we have in place. So I want to just put this all in context. This is a kind of reality check on where we are as a society. So here we see the different primary energy carriers from 1800 till now. And so what you see is we first were with biomass. We discovered coal, and we didn't replace any of our biomass with coal. We added to the demand, and we grew as a society. Similarly for oil and gas. And renewables has a very small share relative at the top there. And what we can see here is we are not doing nearly enough to transition away from fossil fuels yet. And so as a result of that, we see here a plot of the carbon emissions parts per million over time from the 1960s till now, overlaid with our various climate agreements. And you could also overlay COP negotiations over this. And so what we see here as a key message that I think even a child could derive quickly is that what we're doing is not enough to solve the problem that we say we're seeking to solve. And so it is vital for us to understand the depths of this problem, the complexities of it, because as a result of this, we see an increase in news headlines around the world about flooding events, heat waves, exacerbation of poverty, conflict, and the cost of this. So even from a cost perspective, if you gave no value to human life, it is very expensive to go this route. And so it is very vital for us then to turn to urban resilience, because without urban resilience for human well-being, we will see a lot more suffering. So I just want to highlight very quickly, I have a minute and a half here, ways that we use energy planning models to tackle resilience. So these are all studies that we've done, and I'll put a link to the project, but in this one, we looked at how climate migration, rising temperatures, and in the informal sector impact energy demand and energy system planning. In the case of Accra, Ghana, that's what we're also looking at as a case study. So we see here the range of SSPs or shared socioeconomic pathway scenarios. And we see there's about a 45% increase in energy if we don't consider these issues compared to a baseline. That's kind of a key message. The cost of resilience. So we did the modeling here of planning for resilience versus not. And we see that this is the cost of designing a more resilient system compared to a basic system. This is over the entire lifetime for 30 years. This is in 1 year, the cost savings you have under a shock scenario where you have multiple effects going on. So the message is it pays off to plan for resilience, but you have to be a long-term thinker. In this study here, let me see if I can read that. These are power outages due to extreme flooding events in different climate change scenarios. So we see the increase across the board of all of them, and then the need for us then to plan accordingly. In this last study here, we looked at other uncertainties, and this was to do with currency depreciation. So when you have a currency, volatile currencies, as you do in many countries around the world, it thwarts their plans to invest in renewable energy. And so in this case, we had a scenario where we saw an 80% reduction. In orange, you'll see solar energy there. That's all you need to know. And you see there's no solar energy coming in this scenario where we have currency depreciation compared to the baseline assumptions that everything is going to be fine as we are currently planning based on where you see PV coming in even in 2030. So yeah, so that's my I just want to show how we can use energy planning models in quantitative ways to show us to justify the need for urban resilience. And this is just that's about my research and about the project and all of the studies which I mentioned and more that you can find on this Measures project where we try to improve urban resilience in using urban energy planning tools. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marshall. You've been with your group, you're head of group at EMPA, very active in terms of bringing the energy system into the transition. I want to thank you for your understanding of shortening the presentations. Jana, you're the last one to close up this discussion. You're at ETH Zurich. You work on migration trend and how it affects urban cities and urbanization and the relation with climate change. The floor is yours.
Great. Thank you, Alexander, for the introduction. Jan Freihard, my name, from the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology, ETH Zurich. And I like to connect this discussion on sustainable urban development with another megatrend that we're observing, and that is migration in relationship to climate change. So I like to motivate very briefly with an observation of the past years where we see an increase in the severity and intensity of extreme events around the globe. Spain was just mentioned. A few other examples from the past years are given here. Pakistan floods, wildfires in Greece, droughts in Somalia. Unfortunately, the list is much longer. And the essential question, of course, is what do people do if their livelihoods are as drastically affected? As we can see, for example, in the case of the Somalia droughts, people will start moving. And the big question here is, where do people go? For this, we conduct currently a large-scale panel study in Bangladesh, where we follow a set of 2,000 households living in a climate-vulnerable region and try to understand where do people move if they are affected by environmental changes. And I'd like to briefly show some evidence that we see here, where we see in blue the location of our study households at the beginning of the study, all living along this river system. Now we jump 1 year ahead, and we see that the river has eroded around 200 meters of land here. Many people have lost their house, their plots. All these blue dots that are in the water now, they are basically homeless. And the big question is, where did these people go? Did they all move to cities? Surprisingly, no. As we see in red, these are the new locations 1 year later, and we can see people actually shift just a few hundred meters inland. So this is a very surprising finding that also extends. We can jump 1 year further. Again, 200 meters of land loss. Green dots, again, people move just a few hundred meters. So the first important message here is everyone talks about rural to urban migration. It is a big thing, but many people still prefer to stay actually in their rural communities where they have social ties, where they have livelihood options, etc. But still, of course, people go to cities, and then another stream that we are researching is how are they received in cities? Do urban residents welcome them, or are they rather hostile? And here we find, on the one hand, yes, people in receiving areas, they see the deservingness. So if people lose their house or their livelihood due to floods or other issues, this is seen as a reason that justifies migration to cities. But of course, it's a problem if this migration leads to conflicts over resources. So many cities, speaking of Dhaka in Bangladesh, they are already grappling at the limits of their infrastructure capacity. And then we have another 800,000 people moving into Dhaka each year. That, of course, puts a huge extra strain on infrastructure and job markets and all these resources. So what does it mean for the future? How can cities prepare for this influx of climate migrants that will come? We cannot stop it. So the question is more how to prepare for it. First of all, migration shouldn't only be seen as an issue and a threat. It can also be a huge chance. So if incoming migrants are integrated properly, they can boost local economies. To do so, cities need to prepare. So first of all, we heard in other talks, infrastructure needs to be ready. We need housing, schools, sanitation, health facilities, etc. Cities need to work actively in creating a welcoming atmosphere. And last but not least, of course, very important are employment opportunities. I like to highlight the work of colleagues from ICCCAD, a Bangladesh-based think tank that works extensively on the creation of climate migrant-friendly cities, worthwhile checking out their findings and policy briefs. So to take away first, yes, climate change leads to migration into cities, but we also need to keep in mind that many people like to stay in rural areas, and we also need to take care of their needs. Secondly, urban residents view incoming migrants mostly positively, but conflicts can potentially occur if resources are in competition. And lastly, to prepare for this influx of climate migrants, cities need to make concerted efforts to create migrant-friendly and migrant-welcoming cities. Thank you so much, and back to you, Alexander.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jan. You're closing on this panel discussion, which has been very comprehensive. Geraldine, you brought from the beginning the importance of these, the importance of the 3 points or the hotspots that cities are in terms of enabling adaptive mechanism strategies, but also mitigation, but also from different perspectives from the international organization. We heard from UNEP, but also you brought to us the question of finance, Thomas. These are all the elements that join together and are enabled by the scientific knowledge that our colleagues from Zurich have brought to us. The question is how we can pursue this. I really encourage you to get engaged with all of us. The science policy practice interface is key to building resilience across cities. Thank you very much, and thank you, Max, for being with us online. Looking forward to get this engagement going as we go. Thank you.